She thought the hardest part of pregnancy would be labor. She was wrong. Rebecca Mitchell was 7 months pregnant when her millionaire husband did the unthinkable in a hospital corridor. What started as a routine prenatal appointment turned into a nightmare that would expose a web of secrets, lies, and systematic abuse that reached far beyond their marriage. You see, Sterling Mitchell wasn't just controlling his pregnant wife. He'd been targeting women for years, using his wealth and power to silence his victims. But on this particular day, in front of medical staff and security cameras, he made one fatal mistake. He tried to punch his pregnant wife's belly. What happened next would shock everyone in that hospital. A doctor's split-second decision, a businessman's empire crumbling, and 7 women who finally found their voices. This isn't just a story about domestic abuse. It's about the moment when enough becomes enough. When a mother's protective instincts override years of fear, when one woman's courage creates a ripple effect that changes everything. But here's what Rebecca didn't know that day. Her husband had been using their joint bank account to pay off his other victims. $200,000 of her money, gone. And that was just the beginning of what she'd discover about the man she married. Stay with me, because this story will show you exactly how a predator operates, how good people get trapped, and most importantly, how they break free. Trust me, you won't see the ending coming. The sound of glass shattering against the hospital wall echoed through the sterile corridor like a gunshot. "Stop, please. The baby." Rebecca Mitchell's voice cracked as her husband's face twisted with a rage she'd seen too many times before. 7 months pregnant, she pressed herself against the cold hospital wall, her hands instinctively protecting her rounded belly. The prenatal appointment had gone perfectly. Their daughter was healthy, growing strong, heart beating steady and sure. But Sterling hadn't heard any of that. He'd only heard the word expensive when Dr. Foster mentioned the special monitoring equipment recommended for high-risk deliveries. Expensive? Sterling's voice bounced off the walls, drawing stares from passing nurses. "Do you have any idea how much I've already spent on this pregnancy? The private suite, the specialist, your ridiculous organic everything?" Becca's hands moved protectively over her belly. The baby kicked, as if responding to the tension radiating through her body. "Sterling, people are watching. I don't care who's watching." His voice climbed higher, echoing down the hallway. Concerned faces turned their way. "You think money grows on trees? You think because I have it, you can just waste it like water?" The irony cut deep. Sterling Mitchell, founder of 3 successful tech companies, worth an estimated $40 million, was screaming about money in a hospital corridor. But Becca knew this wasn't about money. It never was. This was about control. "I never asked for anything extra," she whispered, hoping to calm him. "Dr. Foster recommended—" "Dr. Foster. Dr. Foster," Sterling mimicked her voice with cruel precision. "Maybe Dr. Foster can pay for it herself. Maybe Dr. Foster can explain to my accountant why every appointment costs more than most people make in a month." The baby kicked harder now, and Becca rubbed the spot gently. "You're scaring her, Sterling." Something dark flashed across his face. "Her? You don't know it's a girl." The ultrasound clearly showed. "Could be wrong, better be wrong. I need a son to carry on the Mitchell name, not some weak little princess who'll cost me a fortune in wedding expenses." The words hit like physical blows. Becca felt tears threaten, but forced them back. Crying only made him angrier. "Mr. Mitchell," the voice cut through Sterling's rant like a blade. Dr. James Harrison approached from down the corridor arm, his emergency room scrubs marking him as hospital staff. 6 feet 3 inches, a former college football player, he commanded attention even in the sterile hospital environment. Sterling turned, his face flushing deeper red. "This is none of your business, Doctor Harrison. And when someone is causing a disturbance in my hospital, threatening a pregnant woman, it becomes my business." "Threatening?" Sterling's laugh held no humor. "I'm having a private conversation with my wife." Dr. Harrison's experienced eyes took in the scene. Becca's pale face, the protective way she held her belly, the slight tremor in her hands. 20 years in emergency medicine had taught him to read the signs of domestic trouble. "Mrs. Mitchell, are you feeling all right?" Before Becca could respond, Sterling stepped between them. "She's fine, we're leaving." He grabbed Becca's arm roughly, and she winced. The grip was familiar, too tight, designed to remind her who was in charge. The baby responded with another sharp kick, as if protesting her father's treatment. Actually, Dr. Harrison's voice remained professionally calm. "I'd like to check on both mother and baby after such obvious stress. Elevated cortisol levels can be dangerous at this stage of pregnancy." Sterling's grip tightened on Becca's arm. She could feel his fingers digging in, knew there would be bruises tomorrow. "I said we're leaving." That's when something inside Sterling snapped completely. Whether from rage, frustration, or the simple inability to control every aspect of the situation, he did something that crossed every line. His free hand, already clenched into a fist from anger, drew back with deadly intent and aimed directly at Becca's pregnant belly. Time slowed to a crawl. Becca saw the fist coming toward her unborn daughter. Her mind couldn't process what was happening. This was Sterling, her husband, the father of her child. He couldn't possibly be about to. The freeze response hit her like paralysis, that split second when your brain simply cannot accept that the unthinkable is actually happening. When the person who promised to love and protect you becomes the greatest threat to everything you hold dear. The sound that followed wasn't the impact of fist meeting belly. It was the solid thunk of Sterling's body slamming against the opposite wall as Dr. Harrison moved faster than the physics should have allowed. Dr. Harrison had Sterling pinned against the wall before Becca's next heartbeat. "Security to Corridor 5B, security to Corridor 5B immediately." The intercom crackled overhead, but Dr. Harrison didn't release his hold. His forearm pressed across Sterling's throat with controlled precision, enough to restrain, not enough to harm. "You just attempted to assault a pregnant woman," he said quietly, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd seen too much violence, in front of multiple witnesses, in a hospital. Sterling struggled against the doctor's grip, his face turning red. "Get your hands off me. Do you know who I am?" A man who just tried to punch his pregnant wife. The words hung in the air like an indictment. Nurses had gathered at a safe distance, some pulling out their phones to document the scene. Hospital security rounded the corner at a run, followed by what looked like an administrator. Becca slid down the wall until she was sitting on the cold floor, her hands wrapped protectively around her belly. The baby was moving frantically now, responding to her mother's skyrocketing heart rate and flood of stress hormones. "It's okay, sweetheart," she whispered to her daughter. "Mommy's okay. You're okay. We're both okay." But were they? The question echoed in her mind as the reality of what had almost happened began to sink in. Sarah Campbell appeared at her side as if materialized from thin air. Becca's best friend since college, now a nurse practitioner at this very hospital, dropped to her knees beside her. "Becca, oh my God, what happened? I heard the commotion from the nurses' station." "I don't know," Becca said honestly, her voice barely above a whisper. "We were just talking about the appointment, and he got angry about costs, and then he just... Sarah, he was going to hit my belly. He was going to hit our baby." Sarah's face went white. She'd known Sterling for 3 years, had always thought he was controlling and demanding. But this level of violence, "Sir, I need you to step back from Mr. Mitchell." The security guard's voice was firm but cautious. Dr. Harrison was well respected, but they had protocols to follow. "Doctor." Harrison released his hold slowly, his hands raised and visible. Sterling slumped against the wall, gasping and straightening his expensive suit jacket. "I want him arrested," Sterling wheezed, pointing an accusatory finger at Dr. Harrison. "That's assault. I'll have his medical license revoked. I'll sue this hospital into bankruptcy." "Mr. Mitchell." The hospital administrator stepped forward, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and the bearing of someone who'd dealt with difficult situations before. "I'm Linda Thompson, hospital administrator. We have security footage of this entire incident. I strongly suggest you speak with our legal department before making any threats." Sterling's eyes darted to the security cameras mounted in the corridor corners. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. "This is ridiculous. I was never going to actually hit her. I was frustrated, making a point." "Your fist was 6 inches from your pregnant wife's abdomen. Dr. Harrison said flatly. Your intent was crystal clear. Becca struggled to stand, Sarah helping her up. Every eye in the corridor was on her now. She felt exposed, vulnerable, ashamed, even though she'd done nothing wrong. That was the insidious thing about abuse. It made you feel complicit in your own destruction. It made you question your own perceptions, doubt your own experiences. Mrs. Mitchell, Linda Thompson approached with gentle professionalism. Would you like to speak privately? We have resources available, people who specialize in helping women in situations like yours. She doesn't need help from strangers, Sterling snapped, his businessman's charm already reasserting itself. This is a private family matter, a misunderstanding that got blown out of proportion. Attempted assault on a pregnant woman is not a family matter, Dr. Harrison said. It's a criminal matter. As if summoned by his words, two police officers appeared at the end of the corridor. Becca's heart sank further into her chest. This was really happening. Her private nightmare was becoming public in the most devastating way possible. The first officer, a woman with kind eyes and graying hair, approached with the careful demeanor of someone experienced in domestic situations. I'm Detective Patricia Walsh. We received a call about a domestic disturbance involving a pregnant woman and threats of violence. Sterling immediately shifted into his polished business persona, the charm that had won him millions in investment capital. The smooth confidence that had convinced Becca to marry him 3 years ago slid into place like armor. Detective, there's been a serious misunderstanding. My wife is pregnant, emotional, dealing with hormonal changes. We had a disagreement about medical expenses, a normal marital discussion, and this doctor completely overreacted and physically assaulted me. That's not what happened, Becca said quietly. Every face in the corridor turned toward her. Sterling's gaze carried a warning she'd received hundreds of times. It meant, choose your words very carefully. Remember what happens when you don't support my version of events. But something had shifted inside her. Maybe it was the protective instincts of impending motherhood. Maybe it was the stark reality of seeing her husband's fist aimed at her unborn child. Maybe it was simply that she was tired, bone-deep exhausted from 3 years of walking on eggshells. He tried to hit my belly, she said, her voice growing stronger. Dr. Harrison stopped him from hitting our baby. The silence that followed was deafening. Sterling's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the cold fury underneath. Becca, you're confused. Pregnancy can affect memory, judgment. The doctor will tell you that emotional stress during pregnancy can cause false perceptions. I saw what I saw, Becca interrupted, the words surprising even herself. The validation felt like breathing after holding her breath 4 years. For once, she wasn't questioning her own reality. She wasn't explaining away or minimizing what had happened. She was simply telling the truth. Ma'am, Detective Walsh said gently, I need to ask you some questions. Is there somewhere private we can talk? Becca looked around the corridor, at the concerned faces of the medical staff, at Sterling's barely contained rage, at the phone cameras still recording everything. Her private life was becoming public property. But maybe that was exactly what needed to happen. Maybe secrecy had been protecting the wrong person all along. Yes, she said firmly, I'd like that very much. As they walked toward the family consultation room, Becca felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Relief. The moment when you stop pretending everything is fine and admit that nothing has been fine for a very long time. When you realize that the person you've been protecting doesn't deserve your protection, and the person you haven't been protecting, yourself, desperately does. The family consultation room was designed for difficult conversations. Soft lighting, comfortable chairs arranged to encourage openness, boxes of tissues strategically placed on every surface. Becca had been in rooms like this before, when her father was dying of cancer 2 years ago. She never imagined she'd be in one because of her husband. Detective Walsh sat across from her, notepad ready but not writing yet. Dr. Amanda Foster, her obstetrician, had been called to check on both mother and baby after the stress of the incident. First things first, Dr. Foster said with a gentle competence Becca had grown to trust. Let's make sure you and the baby are doing well. Can you lie back so I can check your vitals? As the blood pressure cuff tightened around her arm, Becca caught her reflection in the room's window. She looked like a victim. When had that happened? When had she become this pale, frightened version of herself instead of the confident marketing executive Sterling had pursued so relentlessly 3 years ago? Blood pressure is elevated, but that's completely expected given what you've just experienced, Dr. Foster murmured, moving the portable fetal heart monitor over Becca's belly. Baby's heartbeat is strong and steady. She's moving well. Detective Walsh looked up from her notepad with interest. We just found out today, Becca said, placing her hand over the spot where her daughter was kicking. It's definitely a girl. Dr. Foster smiled warmly. Congratulations. Have you chosen a name yet? Becca's throat tightened. Sterling wanted a boy. He said daughters are expensive investments with no return, wedding costs, college expenses that don't benefit the family name. The silence in the room was heavy with unspoken understanding. Mrs. Mitchell, Detective Walsh said carefully, can you walk me through what happened in the corridor? Start from the beginning. Where was the beginning? Today? 3 years ago when she first met Sterling at a tech conference? The first time he'd grabbed her arm too tightly and then sent flowers the next day with a note about being sorry for his passion? We were leaving my regular prenatal appointment, Becca began slowly. Dr. Foster had mentioned some additional monitoring equipment she'd like to use for the delivery. Extra precautions because I'll be 35 when the baby is born. Is cost typically an issue for medical care? Detective Walsh asked. No, Sterling has substantial wealth, multiple successful companies, but Becca searched for the right words. He likes to maintain control over all spending decisions. He reviews every medical bill, questions every charge. Detective Walsh nodded encouragingly. What happened when you left the appointment? He was quiet during the session, but I could feel his anger building. You know that feeling when someone's furious but trying to contain it? The air gets heavy. Both women nodded. They knew. As soon as we got into the hallway, he started lecturing me about being careless with money, about how I don't understand the value of things because I didn't grow up wealthy like he did. Becca's hand moved unconsciously to her belly. I tried to explain that I hadn't requested anything extra, that Dr. Foster was just being thorough. How did he respond? He got louder. People were starting to stare. I asked him to lower his voice because we were in a hospital, and he said he didn't care who was listening, that I needed to learn respect for his financial decisions. Dr. Foster's jaw tightened, but she remained silent, continuing to monitor the baby's movements. When did the situation escalate to physical thermits? Becca closed her eyes, replaying the scene in vivid detail. When I mentioned that his shouting was scaring the baby, I put my hand on my belly and said the stress wasn't good for her. That's when he said he hoped the ultrasound was wrong about the gender, that he needed a son, not some weak little girl who would drain his resources. And then? That's when Dr. Harrison appeared and tried to intervene professionally. Sterling got defensive, started asserting his authority as my husband. The angrier he got, the more out of control he became. Detective Walsh leaned forward slightly. Ms. Mitchell, when your husband drew back his fist toward your abdomen, do you believe he intended to strike you? The question hung in the air like a blade. Becca had been preparing for this moment, this choice between protecting Sterling's reputation and protecting her own truth. I know he intended to hit my belly, she said with certainty that surprised even herself. I've seen that look before. I've seen him make that exact movement before with that same expression. He's been physically violent with you previously? The words she'd never said aloud, the reality she'd minimized, rationalized, and explained away for 3 years. A grab wasn't really hitting. A push wasn't really violence. Bruises hidden under long sleeves weren't really abuse. Yes, the admission came out as barely a whisper, but it felt like shouting from a mountaintop. Can you tell me about those incidents? They started small. After we'd been married about 6 months, he'd grab my arm too tightly when he wanted to make a point, push me aside when I was standing where he wanted to walk. Nothing that left visible marks, nothing that seemed serious enough to complain about. Dr. Foster reached over and squeezed Becca's hand gently. When did it escalate? Gradually. I'd gained some weight after the wedding, normal newlywed pounds, and he started making comments about my appearance, how I needed to take better care of myself if I wanted to be a proper wife for someone in his position. And when you didn't lose the weight quickly enough, Becca's voice became smaller. He started helping me remember to make better choices, pinching me when I reached for dessert, grabbing my stomach and telling me how unattractive it looked. Once, he threw away all the food in our kitchen and said I could eat when I proved I deserved it. Detective Walsh's pen had stopped moving entirely. Mrs. Mitchell, what do you currently weigh? 135 pounds. Before pregnancy, I was 115. Mora, for a woman 5 feet 6 inches tall, those were completely normal, healthy weights. Dr. Foster looked genuinely angry now. Has the physical abuse escalated since you became pregnant? Becca nodded slowly. He says pregnancy isn't an excuse to let myself go, that I'm using the baby as a reason to be lazy and financially irresponsible. In what way financially irresponsible? Prenatal vitamins cost money. Maternity clothes cost money. The organic foods Dr. Foster recommended cost more than regular groceries. Every appointment, every test, every precaution, Sterling tracks every penny and reminds me constantly how much this pregnancy is costing him. The baby gave a particularly strong kick, and Becca smiled for the first time since entering the room. She's feisty. Dr. Foster says that's a very good sign. Excellent sign, Dr. Foster confirmed. Mrs. Mitchell, I need to ask you directly. Do you feel safe going home with your husband tonight? The question Becca had been dreading. The one that would force her to make a decision that would change everything. She thought about their house, Sterling's house, actually, purchased before their marriage and owned entirely in his name. She thought about their shared bank accounts that he monitored obsessively, their mutual friends who were really his business associates, her family 3 states away. She thought about being 7 months pregnant with nowhere to go and no way to support herself independently. I don't know, she whispered. I honestly don't know where else I would go. In the silence that followed, Becca felt her daughter moving steadily in her womb. Strong, determined movements that seemed to say, "We'll figure it out, Mama. We'll find a way." For the first time in hours, she felt a flicker of hope. The moment when you realize you're not as alone as you thought. When you understand that asking for help isn't weakness, it's the first step towards strength. The knock on the consultation room door came like a gunshot interrupting prayer. Mrs. Mitchell, a woman's voice, crisp and professional as expensive silk. I'm Catherine Brennan, legal counsel for Mitchell Technologies. Your husband asked me to check on your well-being. Detective Walsh's expression hardened immediately. Mrs. Mitchell is in the middle of providing a statement to law enforcement. Of course, and I would never interfere with that process. The door opened to reveal a woman in her early 40s, perfectly tailored suit, carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. I simply want to ensure Mrs. Mitchell understands all her options before making any decisions she might later regret. Becca recognized the type instantly. Sterling surrounded himself with people like Catherine Brennan, expensive, efficient, utterly competent, and completely loyal to whoever signed their paychecks. I think Mrs. Mitchell is adequately represented by the victim's advocate services the hospital provides, Dr. Foster said coolly. Catherine's smile was polished perfection that never reached her eyes. Mrs. Mitchell, may I have just a brief moment to speak with you? Detective Walsh stood up. Actually, ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to wait outside until we finish this interview. Certainly. Catherine's smile broadened, but her words carried subtle menace. But Mrs. Mitchell, before you continue, you should know that your husband is prepared to check himself into the finest private rehabilitation facility in the country. Full anger management therapy, stress reduction counseling, whatever it takes. This entire unfortunate incident could be resolved very quietly, very amicably, without any lasting damage to anyone's reputation. The threat was elegant in its subtlety. Cooperate or watch this become a very public, very messy situation. You should also be aware, Catherine continued smoothly, that statements made under extreme emotional duress often prove unreliable in legal proceedings. Pregnancy hormones can significantly affect memory formation and judgment. Medical experts will testify to that fact if necessary. Dr. Foster shot to her feet like a spring-loaded trap. Are you seriously suggesting that pregnancy makes women unreliable witnesses to their own experiences? I'm suggesting that everyone in this room wants what's genuinely best for Mrs. Mitchell and her unborn child. A prolonged legal battle, media scrutiny, financial uncertainty, none of that promotes a healthy pregnancy or stable environment for child rearing. Becca felt the familiar trap closing around her. This was Sterling's methodology refined to an art form. He never issued direct threats. He simply made crystal clear that resistance would prove far more painful than compliance. Catherine, Becca said, her voice steadier than she felt, did Sterling specifically send you here to threaten me? Of course not. I'm here to provide professional legal guidance to both parties involved. Your husband is outside, quite genuinely distraught about this misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Surely you can see how the situation might have been misinterpreted by well-meaning observers. Your husband was understandably frustrated about escalating medical costs, a normal concern for any expectant father managing a household budget. He gestured emphatically while speaking, as passionate people do. Dr. Harrison, acting from protective instincts, may have misread those gestures as threatening. Catherine produced a tablet, swiping efficiently to display what appeared to be a legal document. Sterling has already agreed to comprehensive anger management, counseling, and stress reduction therapy through the most respected programs available. He's also prepared to establish a completely separate account for all pregnancy and baby-related expenses, with no oversight or spending limits whatsoever. The offer was remarkably generous, suspiciously generous. What exactly does he expect in return? Becca asked. Simply that this matter be resolved privately between family members. No criminal charges filed, no media attention, no lasting impact on either of your professional reputations. Detective Walsh crossed her arms. Ma'am, attempted assault on a pregnant woman is a criminal matter, not a civil dispute between family members. Which is precisely why, Catherine said with practiced smoothness, we want to address the underlying issues comprehensively before anyone makes irreversible decisions based on a single moment of poor judgment. She looked directly at Becca with calculating eyes. Divorce proceedings can be extraordinarily expensive, Mrs. Mitchell. Custody battles even more so. And when one party possesses significant financial resources and access to the very best legal representation, the threat hung unspoken but unmistakable in the air. Becca's hands moved protectively to her belly. This wasn't just about her anymore. Every decision she made would affect her daughter's future, her security, her opportunities in life. How long do I have to consider this offer? Important decisions should never be made in crisis situations, Catherine advised. Perhaps you should return home, get some rest, discuss this situation rationally with your husband when emotions have cooled. Return home? Dr. Foster looked incredulous. After what just happened in that corridor? Nothing actually happened, Catherine said with finality. A husband and wife had a disagreement about finances. A well-intentioned doctor misinterpreted the situation. These things happen in the best of families and can always be resolved through proper communication and professional guidance. Becca stared at the lawyer, hearing Sterling's exact words coming from her mouth. How many times had he told her that nothing had really happened? That she was overreacting to normal marital friction? That they simply needed to communicate more effectively? Mrs. Mitchell, Detective Walsh said firmly, you don't have to make any decisions right now. You have the absolute right to file criminal charges regardless of what anyone else wants or threatens. This choice belongs entirely to you. Does it really? Becca looked directly at Catherine. Really and truly? Catherine's practiced smile that was answer enough. Let me ask you something specific, Becca said slowly. If I don't cooperate with this arrangement, if I insist on pressing charges and pursuing this legally, what exactly happens to me? That would be genuinely unfortunate for everyone involved. I asked for specifics. What happens to me personally? Wow. Catherine's pause lasted just long enough to be meaningful. Legal battles create enormous stress, Mrs. Mitchell, especially for women carrying children. Sometimes that level of stress can lead to serious medical complications, premature labor, developmental issues, even pregnancy loss. The room went absolutely silent. Dr. Foster was the first to speak, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. Are you actually threatening to cause medical complications for my patient? Certainly not. I'm simply pointing out established medical reality. Extended legal proceedings, financial uncertainty, public scrutiny, social isolation. All of these factors are documented stressors that can endanger both mother and child. You're threatening her, Detective Walsh said flatly. I'm explaining the practical realities of the situation. Catherine closed her tablet with crisp efficiency. Mrs. Mitchell, your husband is genuinely committed to making whatever changes are necessary to ensure this never happens again. He's prepared to be extraordinarily generous in his efforts to rebuild your trust and secure your family's future. Becca thought about the money Sterling was offering, the professional therapy he was volunteering for, the promises of complete behavioral transformation. It sounded so reasonable when Catherine presented it in professional legal language, but she'd heard virtually identical promises before. After the first time he'd grabbed her roughly, I'll be more careful with my strength. Work stress was making me clumsy. After he'd thrown away their food, I was trying to help you develop healthier habits. I went about it the wrong way. After every incident, apologies, explanations, expensive gifts, and gradual returns to exactly the same patterns of control and intimidation. Catherine, Becca said quietly, what happens if the anger management doesn't work? What happens if he hurts me again, despite all this professional help? That scenario won't occur. But hypothetically, if it does, Catherine's professional mask slipped slightly, revealing something calculating underneath. Mrs. Mitchell, your husband is a prominent businessman with extensive community connections. He has a valuable reputation to protect. He won't risk damaging that again. Translation: he'll be more careful not to get caught publicly. I know what I saw today, Becca said firmly. I know what he intended to do to our baby. Perceptions can be influenced by stress, hormones, fear. I'm not crazy, Becca interrupted. I'm not confused. I'm not misremembering. Everyone in that corridor saw exactly what I saw. The validation felt like armor forming around her spirit. For 3 years, Sterling had trained her to doubt her own perceptions, to accept his version of reality over her lived experience. But there had been witnesses today, cameras, professional medical staff who knew the difference between normal behavior and attempted violence. Mrs. Mitchell, Catherine said carefully, I think you need to consider what's truly best for your daughter's future. I am considering what's best for my daughter, Becca replied. I'm considering whether I want her to grow up watching her father treat women the way he's treated me. The silence that followed felt different, not oppressive, but expansive. The moment when you stop defending yourself and start protecting someone else entirely. The moment when maternal instinct becomes stronger than fear. I need to see him, Becca said suddenly. I need to hear Sterling say these things himself. Sterling Mitchell sat in the hospital's family waiting area like he owned the entire building. His expensive suit was perfectly pressed despite being slammed against a wall an hour earlier. Phone in one hand, charming smile deployed for every nurse who passed by. To any casual observer, he looked like a concerned, expectant father dealing with a minor pregnancy scare. Becca knew better. She could read the signs that others missed. The tension coiled in his shoulders like a predator preparing to strike. The way his fingers drummed against his knee in the specific rhythm that meant barely controlled rage. The slight tightness around his eyes that signaled he was calculating responses, managing his image, preparing his next move. 3 years of marriage had taught her to see past the performance to the danger that lurked beneath. Becca, he stood as she approached, Catherine trailing behind with Detective Walsh maintaining a protective distance. Sweetheart, thank God you're all right. Is the baby okay? The concern in his voice sounded absolutely genuine. It always did. Sterling's ability to project authentic emotion on command was one of his most dangerous weapons. We need to talk, Becca said simply. Of course we do. Sterling reached for her hand, and she allowed him to take it. His grip was gentle now, carefully controlled. I'm so sorry about what happened earlier. I was stressed about the medical expenses, frustrated with work pressure, and I let my emotions get completely out of control. You tried to hit my belly. No. Sterling's voice carried absolute conviction. I would never, ever hurt you or our baby. I was gesturing while I spoke. You know how I am when I'm passionate about something. Maybe it looked threatening from Dr. Harrison's angle, But I swear to you on everything I hold dear, I would never raise a hand to you. Stop lying. The words came out sharper than Becca had intended. Sterling's eyes flickered for just a microsecond with the cold fury she knew so well. Then the mask of concern slid smoothly back into place. I saw your face, she continued. I saw your fist. I saw the intent in your eyes. You weren't gesturing, Sterling. You were going to hit my belly because you were angry that our daughter might cost you money. Our daughter? Sterling's smile looked strained around the edges. We don't know for certain it's a girl yet. Dr. Foster confirmed it today during the ultrasound. We're definitely having a daughter. She watched him process this information, saw the moment when his businessman's mind automatically calculated the financial implications. Wedding expenses in 25 years, college costs with no return on investment, the lack of a male heir to continue the Mitchell family legacy. Well, he said finally, daughters can be wonderful too. Look at how successful you have become. The lukewarm response felt like a slap across her soul. Catherine says you're willing to enter anger management therapy, Becca said. Absolutely. I clearly need professional help managing my stress responses. The business has been incredibly demanding lately, and I've been unfairly taking that pressure out on you. That's completely unacceptable. It was a perfectly crafted response, accountable without accepting full responsibility, explanatory without making excuses. Sterling had always possessed an almost supernatural gift with words. She also mentioned you'll establish a separate account for baby expenses. Already done. My assistant is setting it up right now. No questions asked, no spending oversight, no budget limitations whatsoever. Whatever you and our daughter need. Sterling squeezed her hand gently. I want to make this right, Becca. I want to be the husband and father you both deserve. Detective Walsh, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward. Mr. Mitchell, regardless of your wife's decision about pressing charges, this incident will be officially documented. If anything similar ever happens again, it won't, Sterling said with the confidence of a man who'd never failed to achieve his goals. I absolutely guarantee it. People don't usually guarantee behavioral changes, Detective Walsh observed. They work on them gradually with professional help and personal commitment. Sterling's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. I'm a results-oriented person, Detective. When I commit to achieving something, I deliver exactly what I promise. Becca found herself nodding slightly, drawn into his confidence despite everything she'd experienced. This was Sterling's greatest superpower, the ability to make people believe him even when logic and evidence suggested otherwise. What about Dr. Harrison? She asked. Earlier you were talking about pressing assault charges against him. Water under the bridge completely. He was protecting you and our baby. I can respect that instinct, even if I think he misunderstood what was actually happening. Another flawless response. Magnanimous, understanding, reasonable in every way. And if I want to continue seeing Dr. Foster for the remainder of my pregnancy, all those expensive extra appointments and monitoring equipment, whatever makes you feel safe and confident about the birth. Money is no object when it comes to your health and our daughter's well-being. Safe. The word hit Becca like a physical blow. When had safety become something she had to negotiate for? When had basic respect become a privilege Sterling could grant or withdraw at will? I need some time to think about all this, she said. Sterling's grip on her hand tightened, not painfully, but noticeably. Think about what, sweetheart? We can work through this situation together. We always have before. We always have before. Because she'd always eventually given in. Because the path of least resistance had always seemed easier than fighting. Because he'd always made the alternative consequences seem worse than accepting his version of reality. I need to think about whether I believe these promises this time, Becca said quietly. The words hung in the air like a direct challenge. Sterling's carefully constructed mask slipped completely for just a moment, long enough for everyone present to see the flash of pure rage underneath. Then it snapped back into place, smooth as expensive silk. Of course you should take time to think, he said. I want you to feel completely confident in your decision. But remember, we're a team. We're building a family together. Our daughter deserves to have both her parents in her life. The guilt manipulation was subtle but devastatingly effective. How could she even consider tearing apart their daughter's family before the child was even born? Mrs. Mitchell, Detective Walsh interjected, you don't have to decide anything today. There are resources available, support systems, people who specialize in helping women navigate situations exactly like this one. She has me, Sterling said firmly. She has us. Family takes care of family. Becca looked at the faces surrounding her, Sterling with his practiced concern, Catherine with her professional neutrality, Detective Walsh with her genuine worry and understanding. All of them waiting for her decision. But the only voice that truly mattered was the one in her belly, the tiny person who would inherit whatever choice Becca made in this moment. I want to go home, she said finally. Relief flooded Sterling's face like sunrise. Perfect. Let's go home and put this entire misunderstanding behind us. No, Becca pulled her hand free from his grip. I want to go home alone. I need space and quiet to think clearly. Sterling's jaw tightened visibly. Becca, that's not reasonable. You're 7 months pregnant. You've had a traumatic shock. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. What will people think if we're separated right now? How will that look to our friends, our business associates? And there it was. Not concerned for her emotional well-being or their relationship, not worry about her physical safety or the baby's health, just anxiety about his public image. I don't care how it looks to other people, Becca said. I care about making the right decision for our daughter's future. Running away from your family isn't the right decision for anyone. I'm not running away. I'm taking time to make a thoughtful decision about all of our futures. Sterling stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. Becca, think very carefully about what you're doing here. Think about what you are potentially throwing away. It was a threat disguised as loving advice. Becca had heard variations of it hundreds of times over the years. But this time felt different. This time she wasn't alone with him. This time there were witnesses who had seen his true nature. This time she had people in her corner who weren't afraid of his money or his influence. I am thinking carefully, she replied. For the first time in a long time, I'm thinking very clearly indeed. The moment when you realize that clarity isn't the same thing as comfort. When you understand that seeing the truth clearly doesn't make the truth any easier to accept, but it does make it impossible to ignore. Detective Walsh's next words hit Becca like ice water in her veins. Mrs. Mitchell, there's something else you need to know about your husband's business practices. Sterling went completely still. Catherine stepped forward quickly. Detective, I don't see how Mr. Mitchell's professional affairs could possibly be relevant to this domestic situation. They're extremely relevant, Detective Walsh said calmly, when those business practices demonstrate a clear pattern of intimidation and control targeting women. The hospital waiting area suddenly felt too small, too public. Other families and patients were beginning to stare openly at their group. Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private, Catherine suggested with obvious discomfort. Excellent idea. Detective Walsh gestured toward the consultation room they'd just vacated. All of you. As they walked, Becca noticed Sterling's carefully maintained composure beginning to crack around the edges. His confident stride became more measured. His charming smile disappeared entirely. His hands kept clenching and unclenching at his sides. Inside the consultation room, Detective Walsh pulled out her phone and scrolled through what appeared to be official emails and documents. Mr. Mitchell, are you familiar with a former employee named Jennifer Parker? Sterling's face went pale as moonlight. I don't see how my former employees are relevant to... Ms. Parker filed a formal complaint with Human Resources 6 months ago, Detective Walsh continued. Would you like to guess what that complaint detailed? Catherine started to speak, but Sterling cut her off with obvious desperation. Whatever Jennifer claimed, she was a disgruntled employee who couldn't meet basic performance standards. According to her sworn complaint, you created a hostile work environment by making inappropriate comments about her physical appearance, questioning her professional commitment when she requested legally mandated maternity leave, and eventually forcing her resignation by making her job responsibilities impossible to fulfill. Becca felt physically sick. She was pregnant? 4 months along when she resigned, Detective Walsh confirmed. Ms. Parker claims Mr. Mitchell told her directly that pregnant employees represented unacceptable liabilities and that women who couldn't commit fully to their positions should reconsider their career priorities. That's completely taken out of context, Sterling began frantically. There's more, Detective Walsh continued, scrolling further through her files. Amanda Brooks, marketing coordinator, resigned after Mr. Mitchell allegedly grabbed her wrist during a performance review and told her she needed to learn proper respect for authority figures. Becca's wrist burned with phantom pain. How many times had Sterling grabbed her in exactly the same way? Sarah Williams, executive assistant, filed a detailed complaint about Mr. Mitchell throwing office supplies during angry outbursts and creating what she described as an atmosphere of constant fear among female staff members. These are disgruntled employees coordinating false stories for potential lawsuit settlements, Catherine said firmly. 7 women, Catherine, 7 different women over the past 2 years, all reporting nearly identical patterns of behavior. Sterling exploded with sudden fury. This is character assassination. None of these women could handle working in a demanding, high-performance environment. A demanding work environment? Detective Walsh looked up from her phone with steel in her eyes. Is that what you call threatening physical violence against employees? I never threatened anyone with violence. According to Ms. Williams' sworn statement, you once swept everything off your desk during a rage episode and told her directly that accidents tend to happen when people don't listen carefully enough. Becca stared at her husband as if seeing him clearly for the first time. Sterling, these women are lying, he said desperately, his voice climbing toward panic. They're coordinating their stories to destroy my reputation and extort money from me. Actually, Detective Walsh said, they don't know about each other's complaints. Each report was filed separately and independently. Our investigation has been completely confidential until now. Investigation? Catherine looked genuinely stunned. The district attorney's office has been building a comprehensive case against Mr. Mitchell for workplace harassment, intimidation, and creating hostile environments. Today's incident simply adds another significant layer to the existing evidence. The room spun around Becca like a carnival ride. 7 women, 7 different women who had experienced Sterling's rage and controlling behavior in professional settings, just like she had been experiencing it at home. Were any of them pregnant when She couldn't finish the question. 3 of them were expecting children, yes, including one woman who suffered a miscarriage just 1 week after Sterling allegedly told her that pregnancy was nature's way of weeding out the professionally uncommitted. Becca's hands flew protectively to her belly. The baby kicked frantically, as if responding to her mother's surge of stress hormones. He actually said that to a pregnant woman? According to her detailed, sworn statement, yes. Sterling's carefully constructed mask had completely crumbled now. The charming businessman was gone, replaced by the angry, desperate man Becca recognized from their worst private moments. These women are trying to destroy everything I've built, he shouted. They want money, media attention, revenge for their own professional failures. Mr. Mitchell, Detective Walsh said quietly, 7 women don't independently invent identical stories with matching details. Becca, Sterling turned to her with wild eyes. You know me better than anyone. You know I would never. These women are lying. They have to be lying about everything. But Becca was remembering things now. Comments Sterling had made about his female employees that she'd dismissed as normal workplace frustrations. His frequent complaints about overly emotional women on his staff. The remarkably high turnover rate among women in his companies, particularly those who got married or started families. The marketing coordinator who resigned last year, she said slowly, Lisa Matthews. You said she couldn't handle the pressure of a fast-paced environment. Sterling's jaw worked soundlessly. You said she was too sensitive, that she took normal business feedback too personally. She was unsuited for, did you grab her wrist the same way you grabbed mine, Sterling? The silence stretched between them like a vast chasm. It wasn't, I was trying to get her attention during an important discussion. She wasn't listening properly. Did you physically grab your employee the same way you physically control me? Catherine stepped forward quickly. Mrs. Mitchell, these are serious allegations that require careful legal. I'm asking my husband a direct, simple question. Becca's voice was steady, but her heart was racing like a hummingbird's wings. Did you put your hands on your female employee the same way you put your hands on me? Sterling's face crumpled like wet paper. It's not the same thing at all. You're my wife. That's completely different. How is it different? Because Sterling struggled desperately for words. Because we're married. Because I love you. Because sometimes you need guidance to understand. Sometimes I need guidance or you hurt me. I don't hurt you. You tried to hit my pregnant belly today. I was never going to actually hit you. But you have hit me before. The admission hung in the air like smoke from a fire everyone could now see clearly. Sterling's eyes darted frantically around the room, looking for an escape route that didn't exist. Those were accidents, misunderstandings, moments when communication broke down. 7 female employees, Becca said quietly. All accidents and misunderstandings? Sterling's breathing was becoming rapid and shallow. Becca recognized the signs. He was losing complete control of the situation, and that always made him dangerous. This is a coordinated attack, he said wildly. These women, the police, the hospital, maybe even you, everyone's working together to destroy me financially and professionally. Mr. Mitchell, Detective Walsh stood up slowly. I think we need to— No, you! Sterling wheeled on her with pure fury. I can see exactly what this is. You're all conspiring together to destroy an innocent man. My own wife participating in a conspiracy against me. Sterling, stop talking, Becca said firmly. Just stop. He turned to her, and for a moment she saw something that might have been genuine desperation beneath the rage. Becca, please, don't let them destroy our family. Think about our daughter. Think about what this kind of scandal will do to her future opportunities. Their daughter, the baby who was moving restlessly in Becca's womb, responding to the chaos and stress surrounding her before she was even born. I am thinking about her, Becca said quietly. I'm thinking about what kind of father you really are. What kind of man you've always been. I can change. I will change completely. You've said that before, many times. This time is different. Why pie? Because you got caught in public? Because there are witnesses and cameras this time? Sterling had no answer for that question. In the silence that followed, Becca felt something shift inside her chest. Not relief, not yet, but a kind of terrible clarity. The moment when you finally see someone exactly as they are, not as they've convinced you to see them. When the gap between their words and their actions becomes too wide to bridge with hope or wishful thinking. When you realize that the person you thought you married never actually existed at all. Detective Walsh's next revelation hit Becca like a physical blow. Mrs. Mitchell, there's one more thing you need to understand about your joint financial accounts. The words sent ice through Becca's veins. Sterling shot to his feet like a man preparing to run. You had no legal right to examine our personal finances. Actually, when investigating workplace harassment claims, we have full authority to examine how settlement payments were made and funded. Detective Walsh replied with professional calm. It's completely standard procedure in cases like this. Settlement payments? Becca looked between them, confusion mixing with growing dread. Catherine cleared her throat uncomfortably. Detective, I really must insist that my client not be questioned further without— I'm not questioning your client right now, Detective Walsh interrupted. I'm informing Mrs. Mitchell about financial matters that directly affect her legal rights and economic security. Becca's hands instinctively tightened over her belly. What settlement payments? 3 of the women who filed harassment complaints received substantial financial settlements in exchange for signed non-disclosure agreements. The consultation room tilted around Becca like a ship in a storm. Sterling paid them to stay quiet about what he did? Allegedly, Catherine said quickly. Not allegedly, Detective Walser corrected firmly. We have detailed bank records showing multiple transfers from joint accounts held by Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell to personal accounts belonging to Jennifer Parker, Amanda Brooks, and Sarah Williams. Becca stared at her husband in complete shock. You used our money, money that was half mine, to pay off women you abused? It wasn't abuse. These were standard business settlements to avoid nuisance lawsuits that could have damaged the company's reputation. Nuisance lawsuits? Becca's voice rose sharply. You grabbed these women, threatened them, made their work lives impossible, and then paid them to disappear using money that belonged to both of us? Sterling ran both hands through his hair, his composure completely shattered. Becca, you don't understand how business works in the real world. Sometimes you have to pay people to go away quietly, even when their claims are completely unfounded. How much? What? How much of our money did you spend buying these women's silence? Sterling looked desperately at Catherine, who shook her head slightly, a clear signal that he was entirely on his own. $200,000, he said quietly. The number hit Becca like a sledgehammer to the chest. $200,000. It was a strategic investment in protecting our business interests, protecting our family's future financial security. Our future? Becca laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. You spent $200,000 of our shared money to cover up your systematic abuse of other women, and you're calling that protecting our future? The potential lawsuits would have cost significantly more. The lawsuits wouldn't have existed if you hadn't abused these women in the first place. Sterling's face flushed bright red with defensive anger. I never abused anyone. I'm a demanding employer with high standards. These women simply couldn't handle working in a performance-driven environment, Ed. Stop. Detective Walsh's voice cut through their argument like a blade. Mr. Mitchell, given everything we've discovered about your pattern of behavior, I'm placing you under arrest for assault on a pregnant woman. The words echoed in the small room like thunder. You can't do this, Sterling said wildly, backing toward the wall. I have rights. I have legal representation. I have. You have the right to remain silent, Detective Walsh began, pulling handcuffs from her belt. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Catherine stepped forward frantically. Detective, this is completely premature. We haven't finished discussing. The discussion is over, Detective Walsh said with finality. Mr. Mitchell, you have the right to an attorney. As the Miranda rights continued, Becca found herself thinking not about the lost $200,000. That was just numbers on paper. She was thinking about the deeper financial control Sterling had wielded over her for 3 years. The joint bank accounts that he monitored obsessively, questioning every purchase she made. The credit cards that he could cancel with a single phone call. The complete lack of individual savings because he'd convinced her that married couples should pool all their resources for maximum efficiency. The way he'd made her feel guilty and selfish for every dollar she spent on herself, while secretly using their shared money to cover up his crimes against other women. Mrs. Mitchell? Durr Foster's gentle voice broke through her thoughts. Are you feeling all right? You look very pale. Becca realized she'd been holding her breath without knowing it. I don't know what I am anymore. This is an enormous amount of information to process, Dr. Foster said kindly, especially while you're pregnant and dealing with the stress of today's events. Sterling, now handcuffed, looked at Becca with desperate eyes. Don't let them do this to us. Call my personal attorney, my real lawyer, not just corporate counsel. Catherine only handles business contracts. Mr. Mitchell, Catherine said stiffly, I'll be contacting criminal defense specialists immediately. Becca, please, Sterling continued frantically. Think about what this means. Think about the media attention, the gossip, the scandal. Think about our daughter growing up knowing her father was arrested. The manipulation was still there, even with handcuffs restraining his hands, still trying to make his consequences her responsibility to manage. I'm thinking about our daughter growing up safe, Becca said quietly. Sterling's face crumpled with what might have been genuine emotion. I never really hurt you. Not seriously. You know that deep down. I know you tried to hit my belly today, but I didn't actually do it. Did Harrison stop me before... Before what, Sterling? Before you hit your 7 months pregnant wife? The admission hung in the air like a signed confession. Detective Walsh led Sterling toward the door, but he twisted back desperately toward Becca. This isn't over, he said, his voice carrying both plea and threat. We're married. We're having a child together. You can't just throw away 3 years of marriage because of one difficult day. One difficult day. As if 3 years of escalating control, manipulation, and abuse could be summarized as a single bad afternoon. After they left, The consultation room felt strangely quiet. Becca sat in the silence, her hands resting on her belly, feeling her daughter's steady movements. "Mrs. Mitchell," DeFoster said gently, "where would you like to go now? You shouldn't be alone yet after everything that's happened." That was the crucial question, wasn't it? Where could she go? Their house was Sterling's house, purchased before their marriage, owned entirely in his name, a fact he reminded her of whenever she wanted to make changes or improvements. Most of their friends were his friends, business associates and clients who would undoubtedly side with him when the full story became public. Her family lived 3 states away, and she was 7 months pregnant with a man's child who had just been arrested for attempting to assault her. "I don't know," she admitted honestly. "There are shelters," Dr. Foster offered carefully, "safe places specifically designed for women in situations like yours." "I'm not poor," Becca said automatically, then realized how that sounded. "I mean, I'm not the kind of victim who—" Foster's smile was sad but understanding. "Abuse doesn't care about bank account balances, Mrs. Mitchell. Being financially comfortable doesn't make you any less deserving of safety and support." Becca thought about the joint accounts she'd just learned Sterling had been draining to pay off his victims. How much money was actually left? How much access would she realistically have if he decided to freeze everything out of spite? What if he cuts off my access to our accounts? Then we'll figure out alternatives. And what if he fights me for custody of the baby? Then you'll have excellent legal representation. What if, Mrs. Mitchell, Der Foster's voice was firm but kind, what if you focus on right now, this moment, this immediate decision? Everything else can be addressed when the time comes. Right now, this moment. Right now, Becca was free from Sterling's physical presence for the first time in hours. Right now, her daughter was safe and moving actively in her womb. Right now, she had a choice to make about their future. The moment when you realize that surviving the crisis isn't the same thing as being saved from it. When you understand that the real work, rebuilding your life from scratch, is just beginning. But also the moment when you discover that you're stronger than you thought you were. That you've been strong all along, you just forgot how to recognize your own strength. Sarah Campbell appeared in the doorway like an answer to unspoken prayers. Becca's best friend since college still wore her nurse practitioner scrubs, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, exhaustion written across her face. But her eyes held the fierce determination Becca remembered from their late-night study sessions years ago. "I heard what happened," Sarah said, crossing the room to pull Becca into a careful hug that accommodated her pregnant belly. "I'm so sorry I wasn't here sooner. I was in surgery with a trauma patient and couldn't leave." Sarah. For the first time all day, Becca felt tears threatening to break through her emotional walls. "I don't know what to do next." "First, you don't have to do anything except breathe," Sarah said, pulling back to study her friend's face. "Second, you're absolutely not going through any of this alone." Dr. Foster smiled warmly. "I'll leave you two to talk. Ms. Mitchell, I want to see you tomorrow morning for a follow-up appointment. Given the stress you've experienced today, we need to monitor both you and the baby very closely." After she left, Sarah sat down in the chair Detective Walsh had vacated. "Tell me everything. All of it. Don't leave out anything." So Becca talked about Sterling's attempt to hit her belly, about the 7 other women who had experienced his abuse, about the $200,000 he'd secretly used to buy their silence. Sarah listened without interrupting, her expression growing progressively more grim. "7 women," Sarah said when Becca finished. "Jesus Christ, Becca. I knew he was controlling and demanding, but this level of systematic abuse—" "You knew he was controlling?" Sarah looked uncomfortable, choosing her words carefully. "I've watched the way he talks to you over the past 3 years, how he monitors what you eat, what you spend, where you go, who you see. But I thought that was just his personality, intense, type A, perfectionist. I didn't recognize it as abuse." "Not abuse," Becca said automatically, then stopped herself. "I mean, I didn't think of it as abuse either. I should have said something sooner. I should have trusted my instincts." "What would you have said?" "I wouldn't have listened." Becca rubbed her belly absently as the baby shifted position. "I was so invested in making the marriage work. I explained away every red flag, rationalized every controlling behavior. He was just stressed from work. He had high standards. He came from money and understood financial management better than I did." Classic gaslighting techniques. The thing is, somewhere deep down, I think I always knew something was wrong. But admitting that would have meant admitting I'd made a catastrophic mistake, that I'd married someone who saw me as property rather than a partner. Sarah was quiet for a moment, processing. What do you need right now, practically speaking? A place to stay, for starters. Sterling owns our house. It was his before we married. And I never pushed to have my name added to the deed. You can stay with me as long as you need. My guest room is yours. I can't impose on you, especially with a baby coming soon. Becca. Sarah's voice was firm. You're not imposing. You're accepting help from someone who loves you. There's a difference. The simplicity of it was overwhelming. Accept help. Let people care about you. Revolutionary concepts after 3 years of being told she was too needy, too expensive, too much work. What about money? Sterling controls all our bank accounts. We'll figure that out tomorrow. For tonight, you need rest and safety. He'll come looking for me. Let him try. I live in a secure building with excellent security cameras. And after today, he'll have much bigger problems than the tracking you down. Becca's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. This is Catherine Brennan. Your husband has been released on bail. He's very anxious to speak with you and resolve this unfortunate misunderstanding. Please call me at your earliest convenience. Sarah read the message over Becca's shoulder. Block that number immediately. She's his lawyer. She's his lawyer, not yours. You don't owe her or him anything. Another text appeared, this one from Sterling's personal number. Becca, please come home. We need to talk about our future. I love you. I love our daughter. Don't let them destroy our family over a misunderstanding. The words were perfectly crafted to trigger maximum guilt. Don't let them destroy our family, as if his arrest was somehow her fault rather than the consequence of his own actions. Block that one too, Sarah said firmly. What if there's a real emergency? What emergency could he possibly have that would require your immediate attention? It was an excellent question. For 3 years, Sterling had convinced her that she was essential to his emotional well-being, that he needed her constant availability and support. But what had he actually needed her for? Emotional regulation when his anger got out of control, validation when he felt criticized or challenged, someone to blame when business deals went wrong, someone to control when he felt powerless in other areas of his life. None of those were genuine emergencies. None of those were her responsibility to manage. I'm scared, Becca admitted quietly. Of what specifically? Everything. Being a single mother, fighting him for custody, running out of money, making wrong choices that hurt the baby. Sarah took her hand gently. Okay, let's break those fears down one by one. Being a single mother is challenging, but you won't actually be single. You'll have me, your family back home, Dr. Foster, and lots of other people who care about you. Fighting him for custody? With his arrest record and documented pattern of abuse, plus his own employees testifying against him, you'll have a very strong legal case. Money? You're a talented marketing executive with an excellent track record. When you're ready to work again, you'll find a good position. But what about right now? What about the next few months before the baby comes? Sarah was quiet for a moment, then pulled out her phone. Who are you calling? My brother Mike. He's a family law attorney with 15 years of experience. He'll know exactly what options you have for accessing marital assets, filing for temporary support, protecting yourself legally. Sarah, it's almost 9 o'clock at night. He owes me for covering his wedding expenses when his fiance's family backed out at the last minute. Sarah put the phone to her ear with a determined smile. Mike, it's Sarah. I need a major favor, and I need it tonight. As Sarah explained the situation to her brother, Becca allowed herself to imagine a different future. A small apartment where she could breathe freely without walking on eggshells. A job where she wasn't constantly anxious about spending money. Raising her daughter without the constant undercurrent of tension and fear. It seemed simultaneously impossible and wonderful and terrifying. Mike says he can see you first thing tomorrow morning, Sarah said after hanging up. He'll help you file for temporary custody and support, and he can advise you about accessing joint accounts before Sterling tries to freeze them. I can't afford a high-powered attorney. Mike's giving you the family rate, which means deeply discounted. Plus, in cases like this, courts often order the higher-earning spouse to pay legal fees. Becca's phone buzzed again. This time it was a number she didn't recognize. Mrs. Mitchell, this is Jennifer Parker. Detective Walsh gave me your contact information. I heard about what happened today. If you need someone to talk to who understands what you're going through, I'm here. The message felt like a lifeline thrown to someone drowning. Someone who understood. Someone who had faced Sterling's abuse and survived to help others. Text her back, Sarah said, reading over Becca's shoulder. What should I say? Just thank you, that's all. Thank you for reaching out. As Becca typed her response, another message appeared from a different unknown number. This is Amanda Brooks. Jennifer gave me your number. We're all here if you need us. You are not alone in this. Then another, Sarah Williams here. The other women and I have been talking. We want to help however we can. What Sterling did to you today was absolutely unforgivable, but it might be exactly what finally stops him from hurting other women. Becca stared at her phone, overwhelmed by emotion. 3 women she'd never met, reaching out to offer support and solidarity. 3 women who had faced Sterling's abuse in professional settings and escaped to build new lives. 3 women who proved that survival was not only possible, but could lead to strength and purpose. Look at that, Sarah said softly. You've got an entire army of support already. Becca's daughter kicked strongly, as if responding to her mother's surge of hope. She placed her hand over the movement, sending a silent message. We're going to be okay, sweetheart. We're going to be better than okay. For the first time all day, she genuinely believed it might be true. The moment when you realize that asking for help doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. When you discover that there are people in the world who will stand with you simply because it's the right thing to do. When you understand that isolation was just another tool your abuser used to control you, and that breaking free means reconnecting with your own power and the support that was always there, waiting for you to accept it. The phone call came at 6 in the morning. Becca had been awake for over an hour, lying in Sarah's comfortable guest bed and feeling her daughter's energetic morning routine. The baby seemed more active than usual, whether from residual stress or normal development, she couldn't tell. Detective Walsh? Becca sat up carefully, her heart immediately racing. Mrs. Mitchell, I apologize for calling so early. There's been a significant development overnight that you need to know about immediately. Sarah appeared in the doorway, drawn by the urgent tone in Becca's voice. What kind of development? Your husband was arrested again last night. He violated the restraining order by attempting to gain unauthorized access to your friend's building. Becca's blood turned to ice water. He found us? Building security stopped him before he gained entry. He claimed he was simply trying to deliver flowers and apologize. But security footage clearly shows him attempting to bypass the visitor registration system and access the service entrance. Flowers. Becca's voice was completely flat. He tried to break into the building to deliver flowers. There's more, Mrs. Mitchell. When building security detained him for questioning, he became increasingly aggressive, started shouting about his legal rights as a husband, demanding to see his wife, claiming the building staff had no authority to keep him from his family. The head of security described his behavior as erratic and potentially dangerous. Sarah took the phone gently. Detective, this is Sarah Campbell. How did he find my address so quickly? We're investigating that now. It's possible he hired a private investigator or simply used his business resources and connections to track your friend down. The implications hit Becca like a tsunami. If Sterling could locate Sarah's address within hours of his release, he could find her anywhere. His wealth and extensive network of contacts made him nearly omnipresent. What happens now? Sarah asked. He's being held without bail this third time by phone. Violating a restraining order while facing assault charges demonstrates a pattern of escalating behavior that judges take very seriously. Becca took the phone back. Detective, can I ask you something personal? Of course. How many times have you seen this progression? Men who start with emotional control and escalate to physical violence. There was a long pause. Too many times to count, Mrs. Mitchell. But I can tell you this. The fact that you're asking that question means you're thinking clearly about the bigger picture. I keep waiting to feel relieved about his arrest, but I just feel empty. That's completely normal. You've been living in survival mode for so long that safety feels strange and unfamiliar. Your nervous system needs time to adjust to not being in constant danger. After the call ended, Becca sat in Sarah's quiet kitchen, processing the reality that Sterling had attempted to find her within hours of making bail. The flowers had been pure manipulation. He'd been planning to force his Pornian into the building, to use his physical presence and wealth to intimidate her back into compliance. "We need to discuss long-term safety planning," Sarah said gently. "I know, but realistically, what can I do? He has millions of dollars, business connections everywhere, the ability to hire private investigators and security firms. How do you hide from someone with those resources? You don't hide. You build a life so strong and well-supported that his attempts to control it become irrelevant." It sounded idealistic, but Becca wanted desperately to believe it was possible. Her phone rang again, this time showing her mother's number. "Becca, Sarah called me last night and explained everything. I'm flying out this morning." "Mom, you don't need to drop everything and come here." "Yes, I absolutely do. You're my daughter, you're 7 months pregnant, and you're dealing with a crisis. I'm coming, and that's final." The simple, unconditional support broke something loose in Becca's chest. When had she started believing that she was supposed to handle major life challenges completely alone? Sterling always said that family visits during pregnancy were stressful and potentially harmful to the baby, she said quietly. "Sterling is an abusive bastard whose opinions about family visits are worth exactly nothing," her mother replied with characteristic directness. "I'll be there by this afternoon." After hanging up, Becca realized something important. She'd been automatically repeating Sterling's medical opinions as if they were established scientific facts. How many times had she declined help, avoided social situations, or made decisions based on what Sterling claimed was medically best for her pregnancy? "Sarah, can I ask you something honestly?" "Always." "How long have you suspected that Sterling was abusive?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "I think I started worrying seriously about 6 months after you got married. You began changing in subtle ways, becoming more anxious, more apologetic about everything, more diminished." "Diminished?" "Like you were trying to take up less space in the world. You stopped expressing opinions in group conversations. You started checking your phone obsessively, as if you were afraid of missing some urgent message. You began declining invitations to things you used to love doing." Becca thought about the marketing conferences she'd stopped attending because Sterling said they were networking wastes of time and money. The monthly girls' nights she'd abandoned because he needed her at home for important discussions. The photography hobby she'd given up because he found her equipment cluttering their shared spaces. Death by 1,000 tiny compromises. "Why didn't you say something directly?" "I tried in subtle ways. Remember when I suggested that couples of communication workshop at the community center?" Becca did remember Sterling had laughed it off, saying they didn't need strangers telling them how to talk to each other. "I should have been more direct," Sarah continued, "but abusers are incredibly skilled at isolating their victims from people who might speak up. He made sure you always had reasonable explanations for his behavior." The doorbell rang and both women froze instinctively. "Probably just a delivery," Sarah said, but she checked the security monitor carefully before opening the door. It was Jennifer Parker. The woman was younger than Becca had expected, maybe 28 years old, with tired eyes and a determined set to her shoulders. She carried a large cardboard box and what appeared to be a thick legal folder. "I hope it's okay that I came by," Jennifer said. "Amanda and Sarah Williams wanted to come too, but we thought that might feel overwhelming." "What's in the box?" Becca asked curiously. Jennifer's smile was grim but satisfied. "Evidence. Everything we've collected about Sterling's behavior over the past 3 years. Employment records, email communications, text messages, witness statements from other employees who were afraid to come forward officially." She set the box on Sarah's kitchen table with obvious reverence. "Detective Walsh said the district attorney is building a comprehensive case, but we wanted to make sure you had copies of everything too." Becca stared at the box as if it contained explosives. "How much evidence is there?" 3 years worth of documentation. We've been systematically collecting everything since Jennifer first filed her HR complaint," Amanda said. speaking for the first time. We knew that eventually someone with resources and credibility would take him seriously. Someone like me. Someone exactly like you. No offense, but you being his wife, being pregnant, the incident happening in a public hospital with the medical witnesses, it creates a perfect storm of circumstances that he can't charm or buy his way out of. Becca opened the box and pulled out a folder labeled Email Communications. The first page was a printout of an email Sterling had sent to Jennifer. Your emotional outbursts during team meetings are unprofessional and disruptive. If you cannot maintain appropriate workplace behavior, you should consider whether this position is suitable for someone in your current condition. Your current condition? Becca looked up. I was 3 months pregnant, Jennifer said quietly. That email was sent the day after I informed HR about my pregnancy. The next page was even worse. Pregnancy is not a disability, and I will not treat it as such. If you cannot fulfill 100% of your job responsibilities, I'll find someone who can. Page after page of similar communications. Not just to Jennifer, but to Amanda, Sarah Williams, and 4 other women. A clear, documented pattern of targeting pregnant employees and women who wouldn't submit to his control. He's a predator, Becca said quietly. Yes, Jennifer agreed, but he's also incredibly arrogant. He documented everything in writing because he thought his wealth and position made him untouchable. Recorded meetings? Amanda pulled out her smartphone. Company policy requires all performance reviews to be audio recorded for legal protection. Sterling forgot about that when he said this to me. She pressed play, and Sterling's voice filled Sarah's kitchen. You need to understand that your continued employment depends entirely on your attitude and cooperation. Women who create problems in my organization tend to find their career prospects very limited. I'd hate for that to happen to a promising young professional like yourself. Becca closed her eyes, recognizing the tone. False concern masking a direct threat. The other women who filed complaints? Some are willing to testify in court. Others are still too frightened of his retaliation. But between the 3 of us and all the documented evidence, the district attorney believes they have an exceptionally strong case. In my role, you're the keystone, Jennifer said gently. You're his wife, you're pregnant, and the assault attempt was witnessed by multiple medical professionals. You make it impossible for him to claim this was all just workplace misunderstandings with disgruntled employees. Becca's daughter kicked vigorously and she placed her hand over the movement protectively. What exactly do you need from me? Just the truth, your story, what he did to you, how the abuse escalated over time, what happened yesterday at the hospital. I can do that. There's something else important, Amanda said carefully. We've been in contact with women from his previous companies. This pattern of behavior goes back at least 5 years, probably longer. You weren't his first victim, but with your help, you might be his last. The weight of that responsibility felt enormous. Becca wasn't just fighting for herself and her unborn daughter. She was fighting for every woman who might cross Sterling's path in the future. When do we start, she asked. The moment when you realize that your survival isn't just about you anymore. When you understand that speaking your truth isn't just about healing your own wounds, it's about preventing others from being wounded in the same way. When you discover that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more important than your fear. 3 months later, Becca stood in the courthouse bathroom, splashing cold water on her face and trying to calm her racing heart. Today was sentencing day. Today, a judge would decide how Sterling Mitchell would pay for his crimes. At 32 weeks pregnant, she was large and uncomfortable, but her daughter was healthy and increasingly active. Dr. Foster had cleared her to attend the hearing, though she'd insisted on having medical support standing by in case the stress triggered early labor. You ready for this? Sarah asked from behind her. Becca dried her face carefully and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back was fundamentally different from the one who'd been attacked in a hospital corridor 3 months ago. Stronger, calmer, more genuinely herself than she'd been in years. I'm ready. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Jennifer, Amanda, and Sarah Williams sat in the front row, along with 2 other women who had found the courage to come forward after Sterling's arrest made national news. Becca's mother sat directly behind them, having relocated to the city to help with baby preparations and provide emotional support. Detective Walsh stood near the prosecutor's table, her presence both professional and protective. Sterling sat at the defendant's table in an expensive suit, flanked by two high-priced criminal defense attorneys. He'd lost considerable weight during his time in custody, and his hair was graying noticeably at the temples. Prison had clearly not been kind to him. Catherine Brennan was conspicuously absent. She distanced herself and her law firm from Sterling after the full scope of his behavior became public knowledge. All rise for the Honorable Judge Margaret Harrison. Judge Harrison entered with the bearing of someone who'd seen every type of human behavior and wasn't easily impressed. She was a woman in her 60s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a well-earned reputation for fair but firm justice. The trial had been swift and decisive. Sterling's expensive legal team had tried desperately to paint him as a demanding but not abusive employer, and his attack on Becca as an isolated incident triggered by pregnancy-related stress. The prosecution had systematically destroyed that narrative with testimony from 7 women, expert medical witnesses, and hospital security footage that clearly showed Sterling's intent to strike Becca's pregnant belly. The jury had deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on multiple counts of assault, workplace harassment, and violation of protective orders. Mr. Mitchell, please stand for sentencing. Sterling rose slowly, his lawyers flanking him for support. For a brief moment, his eyes met Becca's across the courtroom. She saw no genuine remorse there, only anger and self-pity. Before I pronounce sentence, Judge Harrison said, I want to address the victims in this case directly. She looked at Becca first. Mrs. Mitchell, your courage in coming forward and telling your truth has prevented this man from harming countless other women. Your testimony was clear, compelling, and utterly credible. Then to the others, Ms. Parker, Ms. Brooks, Ms. Williams, your persistence in documenting Mr. Mitchell's behavior and supporting this prosecution demonstrates remarkable strength and character. Finally, she turned back to Sterling. Mr. Mitchell, you systematically used your wealth and position to intimidate, control, and abuse women who trusted you. You created atmospheres of fear in your workplaces and in your home. Most seriously, you attempted to physically assault your pregnant wife, an act that endangered both her life and that of your unborn child. Sterling's jaw was clenched tight, his hands fisted at his sides. Your defense team has argued that you are fundamentally a good man under stress who made poor decisions. I categorically disagree. The evidence presented shows a calculated pattern of predatory behavior spanning multiple years and multiple victims. This was not stress. This was the systematic abuse of power. Judge Harrison consulted her notes carefully. For the assault charges, I sentence you to 5 years in state prison. For the workplace harassment charges, an additional 2 years to run concurrently. For violation of protective orders, 1 year to run consecutively. Sterling's legs buckled slightly. His lawyers caught his arms to steady him. Additionally, you are ordered to pay full restitution to all victims for therapy costs, lost wages, and legal fees. You are permanently barred from holding any management position over female employees. Upon your eventual release, you will serve 5 years of supervised probation with mandatory anger management and psychological counseling. The judge's gavel fell with finality. Furthermore, regarding the custody matter, given your conviction for attempting to assault your pregnant wife, you are denied all parental rights pending a future hearing that cannot occur for a minimum of 3 years post-release. Becca felt her mother's hand squeeze her shoulder gently. It was truly over. As Sterling was led away in handcuffs, he turned back toward Becca one final time. His mouth moved, forming words she couldn't hear but could easily read. This isn't over. But it was over. His power to frighten her, control her, or threaten her daughter's safety was permanently broken. Outside the courthouse, the group gathered on the stone steps in the crisp autumn sunshine. Becca felt her daughter moving actively, as if she too sensed the profound change in their circumstances. What happens now? Jennifer asked. Now we rebuild, Becca said with quiet confidence. All of us. Jennifer was launching her own consulting arm, using her settlement money as startup capital. Amanda had accepted a position with a nonprofit organization focused on workplace safety advocacy. Sarah Williams was 3 chapters into a book about surviving corporate abuse. And Becca? She was moving back to her hometown, closer to her mother to raise her daughter in peace and safety. She'd accepted a remote position with a marketing firm specializing in advocacy campaigns, work that felt meaningful and purposeful after everything she'd endured. Any regrets? Sarah asked as they walked toward their cars. Becca considered the question seriously. About pressing charges? About the trial? None whatsoever. But I do regret how long it took me to see the situation clearly, how many warning signs I ignored or rationalized away. That's not your fault, Amanda said firmly. That's exactly what abusers do. They systematically train you to doubt your own perceptions and experiences. I understand that intellectually, but I still think about all the women who might have been spared if I'd found my voice sooner. And how many women are being protected now because you did find your voice? Jennifer countered. The ripple effects of courage extend in all directions. Dr. Harrison appeared as they reached the parking area. He'd testified during the trial about the medical implications of domestic violence during pregnancy, and his intervention had been crucial evidence in the prosecution's case. Mrs. Mitchell, how are you feeling? Relieved, exhausted, ready to meet my daughter. Becca smiled genuinely. She's been particularly active today, like she knows something important happened. Babies often respond to their mother's emotional states. She probably feels your sense of resolution and peace. Becca's phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Foster. Saw the news coverage of the sentencing. So incredibly proud of you. Can't wait to meet your little girl next month. Next month, in just 4 weeks, Becca would become a mother, not the anxious, controlled version of motherhood Sterling had envisioned, but something entirely her own. What are you going to tell her when she's old enough to ask about her father? Sarah asked as they prepared to part ways. Becca had contemplated this question countless times during her pregnancy. The truth, in age-appropriate ways, that sometimes people who should love us don't know how to do it safely. That she deserves to be treated with respect and kindness always. That standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's absolutely necessary. And if he tries to contact her when she's older, then she'll have been raised by women who taught her to recognize manipulation and value her own worth. She'll make her own informed decisions with full knowledge of who he really is. The group exchanged heartfelt hugs and promises to stay closely connected. As Becca walked to her car with Sarah and her mother, she felt the weight of the past 3 months settling into something like genuine peace. You know what I realized today? She said as they drove through the familiar city streets. What's that, sweetheart? Her mother asked from the passenger seat. I spent 3 years being afraid of Sterling's anger, but I was never afraid of his sadness or disappointment. When he was angry, he was genuinely dangerous. When he was sad, he was manipulative. But I never once saw him express genuine remorse or take accountability for the harm he caused. What's the difference? Sarah asked from the driver's seat. Anger and sadness focus entirely on his feelings, his pain, his sense of loss. True remorse would have focused on the damage he inflicted on others. He was always the victim in his own narrative, even when he was actively victimizing other people. They drove in comfortable silence for a while, past the familiar landmarks of the city where Becca had met Sterling, married him, and ultimately found the strength to leave him behind. Tomorrow she would fly home to her mother's house, where a beautiful nursery waited, painted in soft yellows and greens, filled with books and toys and unlimited possibility. Next week, she would begin her new job. In 4 weeks, she would become a mother. The future stretched ahead of her, uncertain but no longer frightening. For the first time in years, uncertainty felt like possibility rather than threat. 6 weeks later, Becca sat in the rocking chair in her daughter's nursery, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Emma Rose, named for Becca's beloved grandmother, slept peacefully in her arms, born healthy and strong at 38 weeks. The birth had been everything Sterling's presence would have made impossible. Calm, supportive, focused entirely on Becca's needs and Emma's safe arrival. Sarah had flown in to serve as her labor coach, and her mother had never left her side. Sterling's parental rights remained permanently terminated. He'd attempted multiple appeals from prison, but each had been denied. Emma would grow up knowing her father's name, but never experiencing his influence. Becca's phone chimed softly with a text from Jennifer. Saw the photo you posted. She's absolutely beautiful. How are you feeling? Like myself again, Becca typed back carefully, trying not to disturb Emma. For the first time in years, I feel completely like one. It was profoundly true. Holding her daughter, making decisions based on love rather than fear, building a life centered on safety and authenticity, this felt like coming home to herself after a long, difficult journey. Emma stirred slightly and opened her dark eyes, looking up at her mother with the serious expression that was already becoming her trademark. "Good morning, beautiful girl," Becca whispered. "Ready to start another day?" Emma's response was a tiny yawn that made Becca's heart overflow with tenderness. "I'll take that as a yes." Outside the window, the world was waking up peacefully. Birds sang in the ancient oak tree by the nursery. Her mother was making coffee in the kitchen below. Somewhere in the distance, a neighbor's dog barked playfully. It was an utterly ordinary morning, beautiful in its profound simplicity. Becca had learned that true freedom wasn't dramatic or loudly announced. It lived in quiet moments like this, holding her daughter without fear, making plans without seeking permission, breathing without constantly walking on eggshells. "Your mama made some serious mistakes," she told Emma quietly, "but she learned from every single one of them. And here's what I promise you. You'll always know that you're loved for exactly who you are, not who someone else wants you to become." Emma's eyes drifted closed again, and Becca continued rocking as the sun climbed higher in the morning sky. She thought about the other women, Jennifer building her successful business, Amanda making real change through advocacy work, Sarah Williams finishing her powerful book. All of them healing, growing stronger, using their experiences to help protect others. The ripple effects of courage, as Jennifer had said. Becca's courage to speak her truth had protected her daughter and empowered other women to find their voices. But perhaps most importantly, it had returned her to herself. As Emma slept peacefully in her arms, Becca made a silent promise. This little girl would grow up knowing her own worth, trusting her own instincts, and understanding that love should never require sacrificing your safety or your soul. The future was bright, uncertain, and entirely their own. Rebecca's story proves that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing something more important than your fear. Her daughter Emma is now 2 years old, growing up safe and loved, surrounded by the women who helped her mother find her strength. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you that we all have more power than we think, show some love by hitting that like button. Your engagement helps stories like Rebecca's reach the women who need to hear them most. And hey, if you know someone who might need to hear Rebecca's message, that they deserve safety, respect, and love without conditions, share this story with them. Sometimes we need to hear our own truth reflected in someone else's courage. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because every week I bring you real stories about real people who found their strength when they needed it most. These aren't just stories, they're proof that no matter how trapped you feel, there's always a way forward. Drop a comment and let me know. What moment in Rebecca's journey hit you the hardest? Was it when she finally said, "I'm not crazy" out loud? When she discovered she wasn't alone? Or when she chose her daughter's future over her fear? Your comments create a community of support for anyone who needs to know they're not alone. Until next time, remember, your voice matters, your truth matters, and your courage, even when it feels small, can change everything. I'll see you in the next story.